Welcome to Salon Talks. My guest today is actor, writer, director, and author Amber Tamblyn. She's just finished a brand new memoir. It's called Era of Ignition. And this is a book that's really about a personal coming of age in her 20s. She's looking back on it, and it sort of aligns with our nation's own coming of age, our existential crisis that we're in the midst of. Tamblyn is also a founding member of Time's Up. Welcome to the show, Amber.
Happy to be here.
Great. So I want to talk about your book. I want to talk about the title first and kind of how you came into this era of ignition.
So I was trying to figure out a term to describe what comes post this rage that everyone's been feeling, this sense of chaos and like things are changing rapidly and we don't know what to do, we can't control things. I was trying to find a way to explain what that feeling is afterwards, this momentum that we've all been feeling as far as personal evolution, national evolution, and this idea of things being really ignited. And I do believe that we're in an era of that right now. So that's where I think we're existing in this moment.
Yeah, and when you sat down to write, like about what time did you sit down to write and begin your writing process?
You mean like when did I start?
Yeah, like did this start years ago, or did you really, it was this moment of like rage boiling over that you were like, I'm going to sit down
I think
and
it's been the last several years. I mean, for me personally, it's been around probably since the 2008 election, but certainly I think the 2016 election and the fact that I was pregnant with my daughter then through that entire election, which was just really surreal to be pregnant with a girl in the face of somebody like Donald Trump. So I think that a lot of it began there for me, and at that same time, as I write in the book, in the memoir part of the book, there was a lot of my own personal attempts to break out of the mold that I had created for myself, which was predominantly being an actress and also a poet, which I love so very much, but to find the other places, the other parts of me that really wanted to be nourished and exist, like writing fiction, writing nonfiction, directing movies, producing things. And I really didn't know how to quite get there. So I think the evolution that I've gone through there's a similar evolution that's happening for other people in other industries, no matter what it is that they're doing, even if they're not in entertainment. There's this sense of propelling yourself into what is going on right now and feeling like that's a really scary idea, but that ultimately it's just the most important choice that we have right now is to fully engage at our largest capacity.
Yeah, and I think it's also really interesting that it's these questions about women's bodies and what's been done to them or choices being taken away from what they can do with their bodies that to me feels like that point of like that rage point. What do you think about that?
Oh, 100%. But I'm sure even you, like personally, would you say in your own life that in the last like several years that you have began to think about things in a way that you never would have thought before and engaged, whether it's in activism or maybe in your own career in something that you wanted, that you felt like you deserved? Is there like any example of that? Okay,
yes.
Then there you go.
I mean, it's like and also it's women talking to other women in a way that maybe we hadn't before. Maybe we had, but like in this very public way. Like
and I think also women, especially women like us, like white women listening. I think that is a huge proponent of, a smaller microcosm of a secondary conversation that has for a long time very much needed to be a very mainstream conversation. But being able to talk about these things now and being able to have space for all different kinds of people to talk about not only the ways in which they want things to change, but also to present ideas how we can do that collectively together going forward is so important. And so the whole message of this book in particular is talking about the proactive nature going forward. What can we do proactively to change things? Each one of us individually, whether you're liberal, Democrat, whatever your gender is, whatever your race is, your class, where you come from. Because fundamentally, it's our differences that make us special. It's our differences that make us powerful. And those things need to be honored and respected and really viewed and seen as equal.
Yeah. And did you, when you were thinking about, like, I always think of you as kind of a rebel. Like, you say what you feel, and
sometimes to my own detriment.
Yeah, but I feel like you've been doing that for a while now.
Oh, I've done that my whole life.
To read, you get really personal in this memoir. Like, you talk about a rock bottom. I don't know if you use those words, but like that's what I was. My God, this is a low point, and it wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't. It was maybe like 6 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about that like idea of a rebirth or a feeling like I'm down here, but I want to be up here? And,
I talk in the book about this idea of an invisible alphabet, and that so much of my life for 2 decades being an actress in the entertainment business has been so much about me feeling like I'm not fulfilling my greatest potential. And that in this invisible alphabet, where I am right now is like, I'm at A, and I see this beautiful, amazing, glowing Z in the future. And that Z is everything I know that I am capable of becoming. It is my promise. But I don't know how to manifest the letters in between to get there. And so much of what I write about, especially in the beginning of the book, is really finding that journey. I terminated a pregnancy at one point. I was drinking heavily. I was very, very out of touch and out of communication with my own instincts and my own needs, like what it is that I wanted, where I wanted to go. And I had to pull myself out of that self-recrimination and realize that I had so much more to offer, but I was going to have to learn the tools in order to get there. And it was frankly one of the scariest times of my whole life, which is very similar to how I think we're feeling subconsciously and collectively right now. Like, where is this all gonna go? What is happening with this presidency? Where are things gonna go, especially going into 2020? I think that there's a real fear, but we have to remember that the darkness, that the fear, that the things that scare us the most are often where we find the greater journey and the greater good and what we truly want out of the change. So I see that personally. I saw it for myself, and it rung very true and reminds me very much of where we are right now.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of got you out of where you were was taking a book that meant so much to you, this book called Paint It Black, and like bringing it into a film. And then once you did that, you faced all of these things that we're probably going to get into and talk about, but all of these things that women face in Hollywood that can pull them back, not just Hollywood, anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest,
anywhere.
Yeah,
it's my version of that of create how hard and long it took to create this film, which I'm so proud of. It's called Paint It Black. I believe it's still on Netflix. And the journey, not only to get that movie made, but also to get it sold and get it seen. It felt like an uphill battle that was distinguishably different than the uphill battles that most men go through in the entertainment business when they're trying to get things made. There's this really great quote in Hillary Clinton's last book, which I'm kind of like paraphrasing, where she talks about being a partner at the law firm she worked at in Arkansas. I believe it was Arkansas. I think it was.
You write in the book it's Arkansas.
Okay, then it's got to be Arkansas. But she writes about when she would promote different kinds of people. When she would promote men, they would say, "Thank you so much for this opportunity. I won't let you down." And then when she would promote women, they would say, "Thank you so much for this opportunity. Are you sure?" And that question, that "are you sure," is something that is so universally understood by all women. All women have felt unsure, have been made to feel unsure, and that is the part of the instinct that I talk so profusely about in the book, this idea of paying attention to that voice and really pushing through any part of it that tells you not to go after the things that you want and to put yourself out there, because that is part of the era that we're in. Culturally, we're doing that. We are changing the foundation and the landscape and saying, we won't accept these things anymore. This is the new way that things are going to be. And I think it's important to also remember to do that for ourselves individually and personally.
Yeah, and it gets me thinking about 2020 and this idea. There's so many women that are running or talking about running, and it's like, okay, well, we've reached the point where we've identified that we don't want them to be men. Like, we have a lot of women to choose from, but then there's all of these standards and rules that are placed on them that sometimes feel unfair, sometimes feel like, okay, well, maybe that is fair.
Yeah.
It's like, it's very hard for me to look at a female candidate and like try to assess what's going on.
Well, I think one of the great things that we're seeing right now too is because we have the living embodiment of choice, because we actually have different representations of women, different kinds of women with different backgrounds, different life stories, different, ambitions that are running for president. Now we can have a greater conversation about their policies. And each of us individually can pick who we want. We have choices, whereas we never had that before. Those choices didn't exist. So my argument has always been that it is, while it is of course important to have a candidate who chooses policies and is wants to create change and support women through legal and legislative policy, it is also equally as important to have physical representation of women in positions of power so that you see yourself living in that role. Each of us, whatever that is, whether it's a board of director, whether it's as an actress, whether it's as an anchor, a veterinarian, like whatever it is you're doing, we want to see ourselves there. And that has been so much the experience of women. It has not been the experience of so many women to see themselves in certain positions of power. And I think that is changing. I don't think it is. You look at the unprecedented number of women who've ran for office and won, and they're there now. And they're not particularly types of women that are likable by patriarchal standards. They're difficult. I love it. Love me some Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, and they're raising hell. Like they're
great.
Ready. Yeah,
everything they're doing is amazing. I think they represent the future of this country, and certainly all the ways in which I want to engage and see things change.
Do you feel like some of the candidates running for office now who are a little bit older, from a different generation, are distinguished in a way from that like young sort of energy, or do you see?
Well, I think what's interesting is they're going to have to, people are going to have to start to choose to pick a side in a certain way, and they're going to have to find a way to exist both in being able to speak to their generations, older generations, centrists, people who believe and live in those ideals, but also to the sides of the people who are younger and have different ideas and want things to be expanded in different ways that may not be in the same way as a centrist. We're gonna have to find ways in which to find commonality between those beliefs and those ideals. And I don't think that that's hard, because I think at the end of the day, most people are all fired up, no matter who you are, no matter what you're believing in, especially as far as Democrats are concerned. So we just have to find someone that unifies that fire and that inspiration.
Yeah, it's going to be a long road, though.
It's going to be a long road.
We have a lot of people to choose from, and we have a lot of like reckoning to do with exactly what you're talking about, where we want to go with this.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit now. Well, first, I wanted to talk about these, ways, these comparisons and expectations that are put on women that are always towards men or are so contradictory. Like women live it every day, but you made this really funny chart in your book, or it's really a list, and you read one and then the next one contradicts the other. And can you just share a little taste of that?
Yeah, well, it's basically a list that says like the requirements for women if you want to run for the president, if you want to be president of the United States, what are the requirements? And then it goes through and I did it on purpose, the most arbitrary, long, confusing, complex series of like Roman numerals and subletters and just all kinds of stuff, talking about everything from how you should hold your hands to how much weight you should be, to how your hair should look, to what you should wear, to what your voice should sound like, the literal decibels of your voice, like what is an appropriate octave. It talks about how emotions are illegal, having your period is illegal, having a vagina is illegal. Like it just goes through this really long, insane list, because I think that is so true to how we see women who want to be in positions of power. They are expected to be absolutely everything at the same time and absolutely nothing all at once. We are expected to do all of that. Otherwise, we're not good enough. We're not seen as the universally perfect candidate. And that has been the problem. That has been the problem with this deeply ingrained bias and the lack of representation of different kinds of women in politics, in entertainment, when you see on the movies, in healthcare, whatever that is, because when you don't have the lack of representation, everyone fails, because you're only looking at the few. You're looking at one or two, and you're expecting them to be so incredibly perfect and to exemplify all these different types of beliefs and feelings pertaining to that particular gender. They become this sort of false model for that, and it's unfair, and it ends up becoming a slanted point of view where you're only looking, again, sort of through the male gaze and through the point of view of what men want to see as policy and what men want to see as movies, what men want to see as, television, and you're not really getting a broader understanding of what the world wants.
Yeah, and women do it to other women too.
Oh yeah.
So it's also like breaking that down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope we won't have to hear a lot of that coming up in the next election cycle about, how angry a woman is or how bad of a boss.
We'll be hearing that for a couple years.
We will, or, how awful someone's blazer is. Or,
yeah, but that's why when people are also talking about this idea of, do you think, there's a backlash now? Do you think things are calming down? It's getting so quiet. There's no more of these huge Jodi Kantor stories. But I'm always like, just you wait till next year. It's going to be intense. And you have to remember that this is a long burn, a long, slow burn, and it's going to take a really long time for it to spread and to be able to create the new ground that we want to build bigger, better things on.
Yeah. And also I'm going to shift over to Hollywood and talk about, you've been outspoken, you haven't shied away from writing about things that have happened to you. Mm-hmm. You write a lot in here about recounting some of that. I'm really interested in talking about Time's Up and how some of you and some of your fellow actresses got together around this movement that had already existed but felt like something that spoke to you, and what that experience was like being around peers in a setting that, I don't know, maybe you'd never been in before, where you're talking about actual change.
Yeah, so first of all, just clarify always, because I think it's worth doing. The Me Too movement was started by Tarana Burke, as you know, over 2 decades ago. 2017's iteration of it, I keep putting the word 2017 in front of it whenever I say it now, just so I can clarify the difference between those two things. But also to remember that the formation of Time's Up, which only happened a little over a year ago, it happened very quickly after those initial Harvey Weinstein accusations came out. And that was created. We all created that so that no man or woman would ever have to say Me Too again. And that's the difference, is that Time's Up happens to be an organization. Me Too is also an organization now, but the work that we are doing, I think, so predominantly looks at changing legal and legislative policy and really working from those places to make changes incrementally within certain systems, within the power places of those systems, so that there is safe and dignified working places for all different kinds of people across industries. And I know that seems like such a huge thing to tackle, but when we were first getting in rooms together, and I chronicle this pretty largely in the book, I really look at how we were all didn't know what we didn't know what we wanted, and we were just getting in these rooms together and being angry and talking about why we were angry. And it was something no woman in the entertainment business has really done before without having a filter, being able to sit down privately and say, not only are we going to express how we feel and what we've been through, but we are going to push for change. We are going to make this, we're not going to ask for permission anymore, and we are going to change this. We are just taking it over. And people can come along with us, and the business can come along with us, but we're just not, we're not asking anymore. We're just doing.
Yeah, did that feel like a sharp turn from the climate before?
Oh, it was a huge sharp turn. And I think what you're seeing now too that's come out of that, even though again, it might feel small, but it's incrementally, it's changed. The fact that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which votes for the Oscars, took in an unprecedented number of new members. Last year, I believe I was one of them. So they included far more representation as far as people from the LGBTQ community, women, non-white women, making sure that people of all representations were brought into that voting system. Because while it's just an award show, awards and that award season are indicative of what succeeds, of what ends up succeeding. It's such a large part of it. It's saying, here are our best films.
And to your fundraising for your next film. Because if you can make a hit.
All of it is a total cycle. And so if we are not, if women, and especially not white women, are not brought in as part of that creative conversation, and our stories are not seen as part of the more important, larger lens, then we are failing ultimately to see the bigger picture and to be able to create work that looks like the world that we live in. So we're only sort of telling a half truth with our art. So that was a big deal that the Academy did that, and there are many, many other ways in which the entertainment business has been changing for the better.
Yeah, and how do you handle it? I felt like last time we sat down, we were in the midst of Me Too stories coming out. Mm-hmm. Even just working at a news organization, it was waiting for the next story or pursuing the next story.
Yes.
It was a lot. It was heavy, and since then, men have made some apologies. You talk in the book about Louis and how you were like kind of there for his apology. Like you were going to read it. Right?
Well, no, what I said was that I said out of all of the apologies that were happening, that were coming out that time, they felt very like not real. They felt like it was like a publicist put them together, and that I didn't really believe that they were really sorry or that they really believed that.
Yeah.
Louis sounded to me the most real. It sounded like he wrote it himself. And I really thought it was a thoughtful apology that he put out. The problem is you look at that in retrospect, and the thing that he says in there so specifically is about, how long he's been able to be out there in the world saying and doing whatever he wants, and now he's going to sit out for a while, I think he says, and like be quiet and just listen to others for a change, something like that. And he did all of those things except the listening part. And the listening part is what I think is being so missed about all of these opportunities. So this idea of redemption, this idea of letting these types of men back into the artistic world as far as the entertainment business is concerned. But I'm really not concerned with paying attention to that. That's their work to be done. It's not yours or mine. The fact that we're even like sitting here talking about their redemption, that's for them to figure out how to find their own atonement and to make amends with a situation like this. And everyone is possible and capable of being forgiven and coming back with these regards to this situation. So I think that that's on them, and I'd rather focus on all the amazing artists and musicians and comedians and women who are creating TV shows and movies and who are not doing things like that and not constantly over and over again messing up in that certain type of way.
Yeah, and we need to go, but how do we hold men in our own lives accountable? Because that's something I think everyone handles, whether it's someone you work with or in your family. Like, I think that's work that maybe it's not the public apology is a thing, but the work you do at home is different.
Oh yeah, I write about that, those difficult conversations that happen again within marriages or with our fathers, with the men in our life. And I know that I would be shocked if I met a woman who's not having some version of a conversation like this and trying to get a man that they love to see why this is so important. And that's okay. I think that is what the era of ignition is. These conversations, these difficult conversations, helping men to see how they can be allies, how they can be more supportive, how they can be a part of the process of this large shift and this change, is such an important message, and it's so important that we include men into that fold. Because if we're really talking about large inclusivity, we're really talking about including everyone, and we really have to include everyone. We really have to do that. And sometimes that means that we are the teacher, And sometimes that means that we are the learner. And we give and take, and we go back and forth between those two roles. And that's what makes us human beings and makes us able to, you know, outgrow the last generation that maybe didn't know how to do the things we're doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of it all.
Yes, we are.
Air of Ignition, it's out now. You can pick it up. This is Amber Tamblyn, actor, director, writer, author. Thank you for joining us, and have a good day.
Thanks for having me.